Admission Chat is brought to you by the Standard Application Online. Save 14 hours or more when applying to at least 3 private schools. Start saving time today at admission.org/apply.
Welcome to Admission Chat. Let's talk about the Standard Application Online. Greetings, I'm Darren Worcester, and in this episode, we're talking about the Standard Application Online, also known as the SAO, a common application that saves families time when applying to K-12 private schools. Our discussion will include Jeanne Crowell, the Associate Director of Admissions for Pre-K through 12 at Princeton Day School in New Jersey. Jeanne will share with us why her school accepts the SAO and encourages families to use it. But first, we're talking to Sunaina Khanna, the Associate Director of Product Management for the SAO at the Enrollment Management Association. Sunaina is going to break down for us how the SAO works, and we'll probably get some tips and tricks from her as well. So let's get started. Sunaina, welcome to Admission Chat.
Hi, so excited to be here. Thank you, Darren.
Excellent. So today we're talking about the SAO. And I thought maybe for this first question, it's great to have you here to explain all the benefits and values of the SAO to families, especially those who haven't been through the private school application process before. So let's just start at square one here. Can you explain to us what exactly the SAO is?
Absolutely. The Standard Application Online, commonly known as the SAO, was established about 16 years ago to ease the management of application delivery process. So when we started, it was more of collecting all the pieces that were coming to our facility from parents and making sure that those are all processed. They were pieces of paper, and we were processing and then delivering those pieces of paper into PDF files to the schools who were participating. Over these years, EMA has researched and worked with hundreds of schools and families because we saw there was a lot of value in that idea. It was adding ease to submission. The families would send the applications and rest assured, trusted us that those pieces of material that they were sending were being sent to the schools because they could see that the schools have received it. So we took it further, researched a lot with our families and schools to make this into a wholesome tool to apply to private schools with ease and trust. So to highlight a few benefits of the SAO, which families and members equally respect and really that's the trigger for them for using the tool, are things like SAO allows families to apply to multiple schools using one set of standard forms, be it essays or recommendation forms. The participating schools contribute to the development and refinement of the forms and prompts, thereby removing the need of having school-specific prompts and essays. So talking about efficiencies and removing that burden being passed over to the families can respond to the same set of essays and same forms, and they all get parsed to different schools who are requiring it.
I've got to put my parent hat on and think about that. Like, it does make sense that, the family information and the transcripts and the recommendation forms, that those essentially you're just eliminating redundancy where you don't need to fill out the same form 6 times. You can fill it out once and submit it to all 6 schools. But with the essays, I'm curious about that because the schools typically ask different essay questions for each schools. So now, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying that my child will really just have one essay question and they only have to ask the essay or write the essay once. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's totally exactly how the system works. So just to clarify a little bit, when we talk about the essays, we are definitely putting together a group of prompts into that form. All those prompts that are standardized as part of the SAO are developed by our schools. They have given us feedback. They have given us, these are the types of things we want to know about the student, because with passing times, we've seen that the old type of prompts do not hold their ground anymore in the current times. So they have refined, especially with being in the COVID and pandemic, we have really worked very hard with the schools so that we are consolidating the requirements and not trying to increase the number of forms or passing that burden off to the family. So Darren, exactly what you said, it is a way to consolidate, streamline the application process from forms to even essays, and do it once and submit to all the schools that are requiring it. Because the schools have developed it, they respect the standard forms as they would their own.
So they basically, when a school says we're going to accept the SAO, they are accepting that they're going to take this one essay question as their essay question.
That's correct. Yes.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful. Thank you. What were some of the other, I know you said you had several benefits that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, sure. I can delve into those. As we talked about, the forms are really that one piece, which is holding this tool to a place wherein the families are finding ease. SAO also consolidates the requirements from the schools into an intuitive dashboard. So no need to go into school websites and different portals to fetch the deadlines, important dates by which the application has to be submitted, whether I have to do an interview before submitting an application or after. All those requirements are nicely consolidated into your family dashboard. In addition to that, another key benefit is that the SAO works in real time. As soon as you submit something into the system, we dispose that to the school. So this is really that instant gratification. If you are submitting an application on the most popular deadline of January 15th and you've hit the submit button, rest assured that application has made it on the same day within a few minutes to the school. So you can really have that conversation. I just submitted the application. I want to be sure that I'm all set. And all those conversations can really be satisfying, right? When we are hitting against that deadline. It is real time and it's trusted. All the data is secured properly and then sent over to the school over the web. And the last piece, which is one of my favorite features or benefits of the product, is the profile and portfolio section. SAO provides students and their families the ability to add more enriching data into this profile section. So beyond the biographic data, like the basic data about address and the parents and all that data that we usually enter into a biographic section, SAO also provides the ability for students to add their interests, spotlight their achievements, pictures of their certificates, show their work through multimedia links and such. So talking about convenience, it's really geared towards that very busy family who has a lot to navigate through, but to make sure that they are reaching the deadlines for their students. SAO really provides that service in a one place.
So Nana, you had me at geared toward that very busy family. I'm sure everybody with children at the age groups of applying to private schools their afternoons and early evenings are filled with running to sports and dance and whatever other activities their kids are doing. And the weekends are then filled with all the games and the performances. And the idea of filling out 6 different applications to 6 different schools just sounds like a Herculean burden I do not want to bear. So I love the idea of just having to do that once and submitting it to all the schools. Thank you for clarification on how all that works. One thing I'm wondering about is, this is a software service provided by the Enrollment Management Association. Is there a minimum number of applications I need to submit? Or conversely, at the other end of the spectrum, is there a maximum number I can't exceed? How does that work?
We have no limits. Families can choose to apply to as many schools as they want using the SAO. Of course, the schools have to be participating and in acceptance of the SAO. But remember that we just talked about, even if you're applying to, say, 5 schools or 8 schools, those schools accepting the SAO would have chosen from the standard set of forms and essays and all the other pieces of the application. So adding more applications to your dashboard is not increasing the burden to complete the applications. So that's a good thing about the service, and that's why that's the key benefit that we just talked about. Generally, we have seen, talking about data, of course, we don't want to apply to a whole lot of schools because we really want to streamline and have a very focused search plan before we start using the application service to find that fit the school that the student is applying or the school that you see is a fit for you as a family. We have seen that typically 3.2 applications per applicant in the domestic market, domestic being US and Canada, and a slightly higher number for international applicants, but it really ranges between those 3 to 5 applications on an average. And so to answer your question, there isn't any limit, neither is a minimum or a maximum. You can, but we have seen that the families have a very streamlined plan when they come to us to start the application process.
So that's great to know. And I would imagine that in the beginning of the process, I may want to kind of grab all these different schools that we're thinking about and looking at and kind of start the prep work for, you mentioned, seeing all the deadlines and everything for every school. But ultimately, when I get closer to the finish line, perhaps I'm not going to actually apply to all those schools. So while I'm doing this and I've highlighted that they're one I'm interested in, do they know that I'm potentially going to be applying to their school? Do they have any insight into what I'm doing on my end?
Yeah, that's a great question, Darren, and really points to one of the benefits or features, as you would call, of the SAO. SAO allows the family to engage with the school prior to submitting an application. We know it's a process that starts way in August and typically ends by January. So there's a 6-month period or a slightly more longer period that you are engaging, you are understanding the requirements, you're completing the requirements. And we really have thought through those pieces to make sure that the schools that you are choosing and if you're able to engage with them, then you're really informing yourself for the next step in the application process. There could be instances that you saw a couple of schools that were near or day schools near your neighborhood, but as you engage with them, you see that the fit is, or there's a gap in the fit. So you can totally gain from that experience of engagement to then streamline your final submissions that you want to make to the schools of your choice in your list. So it's a nice way to kick off the application process, engage, research with the schools during the season, and then finally put those final touches to your application to submit to the schools that you decide on.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to make a mental note to ask Jeanne when we interview her later whether she likes having that inquiry come through, at the beginning of the process. For our next question, when it comes to submitting the applications at the end of the process, how does the SAO work with the SSAT? They take the tests and their test scores can integrate in here, but maybe I don't want my child's SSAT score to go to all the schools that we're applying to or on the first run for various reasons. Maybe some schools are test optional, but I know they're highly selective and I'm not sure my child's first score is going to be good enough for that institution. And maybe where my child's going to take the test again to see if they can improve upon it. Do I have some flexibility to say that this score goes to this school, but not this school? How does that work?
Absolutely. All the flexibility that you just mentioned exists within the products that we are talking about here, the SSAT and the SAO. The way the SSAT, the test works is that typically families decide to send their scores once they have seen the scores. So we have bigger population of families going in for that decision after looking at the scores. So till you decide you want to release those scores are just sitting in your dashboard. And to answer that piece of how it integrates with the SAO, yes, it could be that you are applying to a couple of schools. You have taken the test, but the first time you took the test, you really want to give it another try, or you feel that there is a slight chance that your student would be more comfortable taking it the second time and improve on the scores. And that's totally acceptable and something that we see all the time. We encourage that look at the scores. If you are taking the test another time, then wait for those scores to come in and then make a decision whether you want to send that first or the second. Whatever you decide for is what we will release to the school as part of those SSAT scores as such and integrate the ones that you're releasing into the SAO. So nothing goes without your permission. Whatever you release and you're comfortable releasing is what we integrate into the SAO.
Thank you. That's a huge relief. That was something I was nervous about. So to know that it's not automated, and as the parent, I get to pick and choose when the scores go and who gets it, makes us sound even better. All right. So we specifically were highlighting the SSAT there. I know the SAO also integrates with the character skills snapshot. Is it the same thing there? I assume it's not automated. I get to choose. Is that correct?
Exactly. It is not automated. I'd go back a step, right? We talked about how SAO is consolidating all the requirements. So for the families, when they look at an application, they open up the school application card, as we call it on the portal, your dashboard, and they start looking at through the requirements, and they find that SSAT is required, character skills snapshot is required. They'll take the steps to fulfill those requirements by taking a test and getting a score on file, taking the character skills snapshot and getting those results on file. But until they decide where they want to send the scores or results to, those scores and results are not getting released. So it works exactly the way we talked about for SSAT. Your snapshot results are based on your decision to release them or not to release to the school that is requiring them as part of their application packet. The only difference here that I would highlight is that though you're able to take the SSAT multiple times, once or twice, character skills snapshot is a snapshot that's taken once a year. So there is no chance of improving the results because it's a non-cognitive assessment. It's a snapshot of how your student skills are looking at that point in time. So that's the only difference. If you decide not to release the scores, then you would have to leave that requirement as is and not fulfill it if you're not quite in acceptance of those results.
That makes total sense. Thank you. I am loving the flexibility and control as parents that we have in this application. At the beginning of our conversation, specifically when we were talking about essays, we talked about how when schools come into the program and say that they're going to accept the SAO, they are essentially agreeing that they're going to accept all the standard forms and documentation that is provided through the SAO. Thus, it's called the Standard Application Online. But we know that sometimes schools, they have specific requirements or documentation that are particular to their school and their admissions process and how they want to handle things. What happens in that case? How does the SAO handle that?
Sure. So Darren, typically schools are using those standard forms that we talked about to gather the most pertinent information. But occasionally we have schools who are looking for very specific school-specific requirements. For example, let's take a school who's trying to find the fit by asking or would like to ask a family of how they connect with the mission of the school. Now, that's a very school-specific requirement, which should be fulfilled for only that school. In those cases, the schools have an ability to author what is called a supplement form. If the school is requiring one, the families would see it as part of the requirements. And typically, if our families here go back and look at their dashboards, they would see that on the left-hand side, there is something called the supplement form section, and that's where those supplement requirements would be listed if the school has one. Some more details about if there is a supplement form that's required. Please note, because it's a school-specific requirement, only the school that's requesting it would get that response. Not all the schools would see it. Never, and another thing, never do any other schools ever get to see where all you're applying. So it's really like compartmentalized. That way, it's your portal, it's your decision where you want to apply. If a school is requiring a very specific question to be answered, that response will only go to that specific school. When you look at the dashboard, the families it's easy, it's intuitive. The families are able to see if that form is required or it's optional. And if it is optional, then the families can make a decision whether they want to fulfill that requirement or not. But if it's required, then it's kind of contributing to the completeness of the applications. And we've seen that typically the families are so committed to the process that they are completing all the requirements that the application process is asking of them.
Okay, Sananda, thank you. That makes complete sense. For the next question, I wanted to get into the application fees. So we charge a nominal fee every time somebody submits an application that covers all the processing and development that we do for the SAO, and for anybody that orders tickets online or goes to an ATM. I pretty understanding and accepting of what those fees are and why they're charged. So we probably don't need to dig too much into that. But what I am curious about is every school also has their own application fee, and those fees vary from school to school. So it's not like we're standardizing what the school's application fees are at all these schools. So how does that work? Are we, as parents, able to pay the school's application fee directly through the SAO, and is it different per school we're applying to?
Yes, that's a great question. So it's interesting too, because talking about the flexibility, we are talking about the family side experience, right? That how SAO benefits them. This kind of dovetails into how SAO is also helping schools to consolidate their requirements. Schools have the ability to set up their application, setup meaning put their requirements in one place, and then the system starts conveying that to the family. As part of that setup, they are stating their application requirements. Perhaps for their day applicants, they can say their application fee is X amount. And whatever the schools are putting is what we are showing, the product is showing to the families when they add that application. So if, let's take example of Princeton Day School, Jeanne has put, say, X amount for her day applicants, and that's exactly the amount that we'll show to the family when they start their application to the Princeton Day School. Through the checkout process, it's simple. It's just like any e-commerce site. Families are able to submit their applications using a credit card. The application fee and the nominal admin fee that you just mentioned and said that that's a norm in any e-commerce platform, that all clubbed together is what's charged to the credit card of the family. But then there is another part of it. If the family decides or thinks that they have a need for an application fee waiver, they can contact the school directly. Schools are very considerate. They accept application fee waiver applications, and it's a simple request, not an application itself, but it's a request that the family can seek a waiver from the school. If they get a waiver, then they are using the waiver code, and they'll find that on the checkout page. They use the waiver code, and once they have that, the system also waives the admin fee. So EMA, the makers of SAO, we are very committed to the access, and if our schools decide and our families need a waiver on an application, we are also waiving the admin fee that we would have charged on processing the application.
Excellent. And so to get that fee waiver, is that something they get through us, or do they go to the school for that?
Yeah, so because it's an application fee waiver, a school-specific one, families should contact the schools directly and request for a fee waiver. If the school is granting one, they'll simply send an email.
And then they can use that code just for that specific school or for
That's
all
correct.
schools? Okay.
No, this is a school specific, so it's only it can only be used for that specific school's application, and EMA will then process the application using the fee waiver code and waive that admin fee that we talked about.
All right, I'm making another mental note to ask Jeanne about their requirements for giving out fee waivers to kind of give our families an idea of how one school handles that. So down to the last question. Thank you so much for your time so far. When it comes to getting notifications from the school, acceptance notifications, we mentioned before the SAO is really sort of an all-in-one dashboard to understand and see the application process with all the schools that you're applying to. Do they get notifications through this platform as well, or will that come separately from the school?
Darren, those notifications, the decisions, and any communications from the school directly come from the school. And those processes rest fully with the school. SAO is not collecting decisions from our schools and then sending the decision. And I would say there's a reason behind it, right? When a decision letter is being sent or very school-specific communications are being sent, the school wants to have that dialogue, that conversation, the way they would like for that message to be delivered to the family. So we have kept that piece purely with the school.
Thank you, Sunaina. This is very helpful, I'm sure, for many people trying to understand how they can pull off applying to all the different schools that they're trying to apply to and how the SAO can help them. So thank you very much for your time and clarification today.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me over.
Okay, that was great to have Sunaina answer our questions about how the SAO works. Let's turn to Jeanne now for the school side of the story. Jeanne, welcome to Admission Chat, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Excellent. We really appreciate this. Let's get started. We already had Sunaina talk to everyone and let them know what the SAO is. So let's get started with you by having you tell us a little bit about your career in private school admissions and your school in general.
Well, I'm entering my 15th year in admissions here at Princeton Day School. As many people who have been in admissions will probably tell you the same thing, that this isn't something that I had planned on. It wasn't a career choice necessarily or a path that I was looking to go on. I actually had started out teaching in the public schools. Then I was home with my children for a number of years. And while I was home, I opened my own business. As they get older, I sold that. Through word of mouth, I heard about a part-time position in admissions at Princeton Day School. I applied and ultimately was offered the job. I thought I would do it just for a year, part-time, while I really figured out what it was that I really wanted to do. But a long story short, 15 years later, I'm still here full-time as Associate Director of Admissions. I'm also a proud parent now of 3 alums of the school. Princeton Day School, if you're not familiar with us, we are a pre-K through 12 independent coeducational day school here in Princeton. Really just such a great community and strong program that it really has been a great journey for myself as well as my children.
Excellent. And yes, I think that's for a lot of admissions folks, that's a similar journey where it's you don't necessarily go to college to be in admissions. I don't think there's a program for that, right?
Right.
But lots of people find their way there just for love of helping families and students out. So now that we've got your background, and we heard from Sunaina about the SAO, can you tell me a little bit about why Princeton Day School chooses to use the SAO?
Sure. The number one reason I would say that we have chosen to use the SAO is really for the ease of families. While we love it from our end as well, we live in an area with a really large number of independent schools. Families are often, applying to multiple schools. And back in the old days when we were all paper applications, families had to fill out multiple applications. So the SAO really makes it easy for families. The majority of their information, they can just fill it out once, and then it gets sent to the various schools that they choose to apply to. It also makes it easier for teachers when students are applying. They don't have to fill out 5 different teacher recommendations for one child. They can fill it out once on the SAO, and then it goes to the various schools from there. Yeah,
the simplicity and the consolidation is obviously why we think it's great and love it and want to encourage families to use it. So I presume you don't exclusively accept the SAO, right? You probably also have your own native application?
No, we do not. We very quickly went to solely using the SAO. As I said, it's easier for us and really much easier for the families.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So from your standpoint, I think with some schools, they do have a couple of different applications that they accept, and families may be skeptical of which one to accept. But for you guys, you're saying we believe in this, it works, and families should go for it.
Absolutely. And the SAO makes it really easy that you can personalize it a little bit. So while the majority of the information, like I said, only needs to be filled out once, we do have a supplemental form that is specific to PDS sets. So we can ask them, why are you interested in PDS specifically? So it really has that nice feature that we can personalize it. So we really didn't feel the need to have our own separate application.
That sounds good. That sounds good. So let's talk a little bit about ghost applications. So for families that probably aren't familiar with that term, because it is a little bit of an insider term for the schools, that's when a school receives an application from someone that they haven't had any conversations with. So they haven't attended an open house, they haven't, done anything. And so that's essentially kind of the catch-22, I presume, from the school side a little bit with online applications in general, and certainly the SAO that makes it easy to apply to multiple schools online, whereas that it's now much easier for families to do their research online, learn what they want about the schools, talk to friends that go to the schools, look at your social media feeds, and then apply without necessarily engaging in conversations with you. I know that the SAO has a feature in it where schools can fill out essentially an inquiry form to let you know that they're interested in your school before going the full bore of applying and that sort of stuff. From your standpoint, what do you think of the potential of ghost applications? Is that become tricky for you on your end? And do you encourage families to, if they are applying online, to fill out an inquiry, whether directly through your website or through the SAO, or to give you a call, or essentially to let themselves be known and start a conversation with you?
Absolutely. I think any school would say they want to know who's interested in them as soon as possible. As you mentioned, with everything being online and so easily accessible, it is really easy for families to just jump into the application process. They can do all their research and not feel that they're committing themselves anywhere. And then when they're ready, they apply. But there are a lot of steps throughout the application process that they need to go through. For example, their interview, that's part of their application. So it won't become complete until they've done that. So there still is, no matter how long they wait to apply, there's still that opportunity to get to know them. We certainly want to get to know them sooner rather than later. It gives us multiple opportunities for us and for them to meet, to come for tours, that sort of thing. It's rare that we see a application come in with all the components complete. When we see that, it's usually towards the end of the process, and it's either someone who didn't realize that they hadn't actually submitted it yet. That happens on occasion. They're filling it out online and don't realize that they haven't actually applied to us. Or they're applying to other schools and they sort of throw us in the ring at the end and say, oh, let me apply to these 3 other schools as well, since I already have it complete. But again, you're still going to have to come in for an interview or a visit or some sort of opportunity where we're going to have to meet them and get to know them a little bit. And with the potential app feature in the SAO, that makes it easy for us to reach out to families and invite them to these events. So we actually love that feature, because if someone hasn't even completed the app, we can go in and see that they've started or they've expressed interest, as long as they've clicked that little check mark that you can share their information with us. And then we check that periodically, and we will reach out to those families via email or send them a newsletter, things like that. So that's a really great feature of the SAO. I was just going to say, it really helps us to avoid having anyone fall through the cracks.
I think that summarizes it great there. I would think, from the family's perspective, I know, as I have a parent of an 8th grader and a younger child, I know how busy and crazy life is with all their activities and work and everything. So I see the temptation to kind of just wait and fill out the application, submit it. Like I personally would be tempted to do a ghost application, but, looking at it holistically, I love, what you just said, because it seems like, as an applying family, you really want to start talking to the school as early as you can and start building that relationship with your admissions officer, so that when it comes time for decision making, that they have a sense for who your child is, and it's not just somebody that a name on paper. Is that something it sounds like you agree with?
Exactly. Yeah, we really work hard to get to know the students, that they're just not a paper application or an online application, but a real person.
Perfect. Let's talk a little bit about SAO fee waivers. So for families that aren't all that familiar, we touched on this a little bit with Sunena. Every school dictates their application fee, and that gets paid through the SAO, and the SAO has a nominal transactional fee that when they submit an application. But a student can also get an SAO fee waiver that waives both the school's application fee and our transaction fee. How do they go about, getting that fee waiver, from your end, and, what type of decision making goes on your end to decide, who gets awarded one and who doesn't?
Right. It's a good question. So we never, ever want the application fee to be a barrier to applying. So we are really actually very generous with granting our fee waivers. We, for the most part, feel if someone's asking for one, that they need one. And we find that to be true. So we're very generous in granting them. We don't ask them really for anything other than to just say, yes, I need this application fee waiver, and we will grant it to them.
That's such a wonderful answer, and I hope probably a relief to many families that are listening. So we talked a little bit about, preferably not doing a ghost application, and, engaging in those conversations with you guys. If you're looking at the timeline, when should families start applying? Like, what time of the year is the ideal time for them?
Now, we just started. We just opened our application up for the 22-23 school year. So we really recommend that families would start the process as soon as possible for a mutual benefit. Again, as we were just talking about a minute ago, having that opportunity to come in and visit more often. We encourage parents. Right now, everything has been virtual, given the state of the world. But we encourage parents to come to multiple information sessions. When we tours are available, to come to multiple tours, not just once. If the earlier they apply, then they're going to have more choices in terms of when they schedule their interview. What day and time works best for them. Versus if you're coming in January, you might have very limited choice in scheduling your visits. So it's really a benefit to them to start the application process and not feel rushed. It's also a benefit, as I mentioned earlier, to their teachers. They have time to get to know their students and then fill out their teacher recommendation. And again, not being rushed, or January 15th gets here and they say, oh, my teacher rec's not in yet, and they just gave it to them 2 days ago. So it's really, the benefit is on their behalf to start sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And just to give some context, because we're talking about now, just to let everybody know, we are recording this on October 1st. So when Jeanne says now, it's great to start getting your applications in October. And would you even say September if they can?
We start, it's good to let the new school year get started a week or two in, and sort of get things settled. But yes, by mid to late September, absolutely.
All right. And so what about the family that may be listening to this late November, early December, maybe even a little bit later? They've come late to the process. I would probably be listening to this and get really scared. What can you say or advice for someone who's coming late to the application process?
Right. So our deadline at Princeton Day School is January 15th. And we really tell parents that is our deadline, essentially, for them to have all their paperwork submitted. We do lots of things. We're continuing to do interviews and things like that. We also, at that point, we begin going through every single file and making sure that the teacher rec is from this year's teacher, not their favorite teacher from 3 years ago. So it builds in some time for us to then reach out to the families and say, yes, you submitted a teacher rec and it looks like your application is complete, but we need one from your current teacher. So it builds in a buffer. So if someone's coming late to that. We try to accommodate families as best we can. We will work really closely with them to say, you still have some time, because we're not reviewing applications until February, really. So we'll work with them to really get that information in as quickly as possible, get their visit schedules, things like that. But then there comes a point where beyond we say, if it's not complete by now, we'll continue to work with you, but we can't guarantee you a decision on March 10th when our decisions go out. If you're not complete, you're not complete, and you can't be complete the day before. So, we'll work with you as best we can. Beyond March 10th, you're welcome to continue with the process, and if we will get you a decision as soon as your application is complete, as soon after as we can. But we can't guarantee you that space will be available, or obviously that your child would be accepted. So it really is important to pay attention to those deadlines, but know that we will work with you to get your information that we need.
It sounds like at Princeton Day School, you guys have a great team and you're very accommodating. And I know that is the case with a lot of private independent school admission teams. But I also suspect that's an answer that may be a little bit different, if I were to ask it to different schools as well. So for me, the moral of the story, what I took away from that is if we're coming into the application process late, we should really pick up the phone and talk to you and have a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Jeanne, I think it's going to be very helpful to folks, certainly, help them understand what they need to do and probably calm some nerves, in terms of, those deadlines and how everything takes place around those. Final pieces of advice would you have for families using the SAO?
Well, sort of following up on our last question that you had asked, my number one advice would be to be timely and to follow up. Don't wait until the last minute. Like most schools, we have an admission portal. So once you begin the application submitted on the SAO, it rolls over into our admission portal. We have a really nice checklist that parents can follow and see, what is complete, what they need to do. And again, it's really incumbent upon the families to check that portal to make that sure that information is in, that if the teacher rec isn't in, it's up to them to follow up, call their current school, not us. We can't request transcripts. So if the transcripts aren't in, it's not very helpful to call us and say, hey, can you get my transcripts? Because we can't. That request needs to come from the families. So it's really important that they're timely, that they follow up, that they check their admission portal with PDS often, and then follow up with who they need to make sure that all those pieces do get complete.
Yeah, that's a great final piece of advice. Everything has been really helpful. Thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And for everyone listening, thank you for joining this admission chat. Please look for another episode soon. And for more insight into the private school application process, visit admission.org and check out our Admission Academy live presentation series, featuring insight from school admission leaders. Until next time, take care, everyone.